Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 7th meeting of the Rotary Club of Milledgeville. Please silence your phones. And as Michelle Dixon, our retainer of the day, comes up and leads us in the prayer pledge and the four-way test.
Hi, kids. Dear Lord, thank you for this beautiful day and the food that's been prepared for us. Thank you for this club, and bless those in the club and their friends and family, and guide us in how we're going to help this community move forward. Thank you. Amen. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First,
Three,
second,
fair all concerned,
third,
will build goodwill and better friendships,
fourth.
will it be beneficial to all concerned. And fifth, is it fun? Thank you, Michelle. Please remember the cart fund bucket as you're seated. Last week we had $33 in our cart fund. Can I get 3 people to do a $10 match? Jeff Gray, Jimmy, and William Black. All right, do we have any announcements? Jay.
Just want to let you know that Saturday we got Northern Regional speech contest from high school with the 12 participants. And our KYU was our representative, came in second. We missed first place by 1 point. The winner was from Dublin, and she was outstanding. She actually won last year as well. But we should be very, very proud of how deliberate we were in making our selection.
Absolutely. And Jay, thank you for taking that on at the district level. That was
Well, and Jan, she's not here, but she's a rock star. She's great.
Jennifer?
Just wanted to remind you all that you have your sheets on the tables. We're still looking for ideas for projects, big projects and little projects and projects in between. So don't be shy. Nothing is out of bounds. It doesn't matter how big or how small right now. And I'll pick it up at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Greg, you want to come up?
All right. First of all, we've got a sheet that's circulating around, so I can get some updated email addresses and phone numbers. So if it's stopped at your table, please look at it and pass it on. John Jackson, you've got a guest you want to introduce?
For those that weren't here last week, this is Kyle Ellis, guest that I brought. Kyle is a local businessman, recently retired from Georgia College. He's currently with Coldwell Bakers in real estate, and he owns a local franchise of Churros Tex-Mex restaurant. And I failed to mention last week that his sister is also Kimmy Clement. You did not know who he was. Now more than likely you do.
And she's in the room next door.
On the other side of the wall.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Cloud.
You, sir, are a lucky ticket picker. You'll pick a ticket, hand it to me. Thank you, sir. Ticket ending in 118. 118.
Great.
King of Hearts. There you go. Thanks for playing.
All right. This time I'm going to let Jennifer come up. Real quick, Jennifer, before you do that, the Rotary Board meeting is on Tuesday of next week at my office. If anybody wants to come for a makeup, and Jennifer will be running that since I will be leading the Leadership Baldwin Healthcare Day that day. So now, Jennifer.
Okay. Erin couldn't make it in today, so she asked me to introduce our speaker since I'm the one who recruited him. You can see his bio there in front of you, but the way I know Roger Picklater is that for many years we have had demonstration beehives on the grounds at Lockerly. Unfortunately, between some storms and some hooligans in the neighborhood, he had to remove the hives, but we are looking forward to get them going again at Lockerly, and he's extremely entertaining, and this is going to be a great talk. So, Roger.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that wonderful introduction, and thank the club for inviting me to come over to talk about my favorite subject by all means. And I see some faces around here that I recognize. I've been doing bee work around for a while, and I've done removals, and I've been keeping bees for 10 years. I started out with a swarm in my yard, trying to figure out how to get that going, and I failed the first year. The second year, there's a bee club in Florida called Lake Country Bee Club. So I joined that club and I met Dr. Ellis, Dr. Jamie Ellis, who is actually at graduating from University of Georgia in entomology. He is now Dr. Ellis at the University of Florida over there, Honeybee Project down there, an amazing person. And he is a big resource for me. I've been going to the University of Georgia Honeybee College at Young Harris for a number of years. I'm in the master beekeeping program. Haven't gotten to the top of that yet, but I'm still working on that one. But beekeeping is my favorite hobby, my favorite thing to do. And when my wife and I go to social gatherings, she always skits around in front of me and says, "Don't ask me about his darn bees." She won't shut up. So that's what I have to deal with around my house. So my wife is a big help to me. She helps me bottle honey and label honey and do all kind of things. And she pays the bills. So I just love her to death. So anyway, thank you so much for that. So I'm going to give you a little background, a little history. I'm going to talk about commercial beekeepers. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my operation, and then I'm going to wind up talking about my favorite subject, which is his brother Adam, who was a very famous beekeeper at Buckfast Abbey, which is a monastery in England. He was a beekeeper there for over 70 years, and he developed a line of bees called Buckfast bees. Okay, and they're an amazing hybrid line of bees. Okay. So let's go back 350 billion years. Honeybees, well, all bees, all pollinators evolved with plants. Without plants, honeybees wouldn't be able to survive. Pollinators wouldn't be able to survive. They have to have the pollen and the nectar to survive. And the plants couldn't get fertilized. So it's a win-win situation. One of the big plants in our country is the almond orchards in California. How many people know there's a million acres of almond orchards in the Central Valley? You know that?
We've talked about that, yeah.
Did you know that every year in February and March, 2/3 of the beehives in North America go to California to pollinate the almonds? That crop is worth $6 billion. They paid the American beekeeper $450 million for 8 weeks worth of work. So in January, these commercial beekeepers put the beehives on the trucks, drive 24 hours nonstop to California. The bee brokers put them out in layout yards. They put them in the orchards. They pollinate the bees, get back, and then you get your bees back, and you get a big check at the end of the month. So that is what starts the beekeeping system in the United States. All right, so a little more history back there is humans have been maintaining a relationship with bees for over 10,000 years. We found cave drawings in European caves where human figures are on ladders dealing with bees. So we know for 10,000 years, humans have been consuming honey and or the products of the hive. the guys that were, anyway, I'll get to that. So the reason honey was so important to the Europeans is they did not have any sweetener for their coffee or their teas or whatever until Marco Polo came back from Asia with the sugars. So European people, the only sweetener they had was honey, and the candles were very important to them for light. So they had to have the wax to make candles, and then there was the mead that people started to understand. If you dilute honey, the natural yeast in there will turn it into wine, which is a mead that is an alcoholic drink. And if you ever heard of the term honeymoon, where did that come from? Well, the Europeans used to send some mead with the newlyweds off. So that's where that term came from. The honeymoon came from the mead. So as the bees evolved, there are about 23 different subspecies of the Western honeybee in Africa, Central, Middle East, and Europe, all the way up to Asia. As the Ice Age came down, it isolated some of these different groups, and so they had different genetics come in. The ones in the northern climate had to overwinter for long periods, so they had to store enough honey to last from November through April. Then the ones in Africa didn't have to overwinter. They were just there, there was always something to eat, and all they wanted to do was just have nectar and force. They didn't store a lot of honey. So the American beekeepers, well, when the Europeans came to North America, they brought the bees with them. Okay, you go back and look at the manifest on the tall sailing ships that brought the settlers over, and they all had skips of bee hives in them. Brought them over here, and the first bee they brought over here was the Apis mellifera, or the dark bee, the dark European bee. And that's what the settlers brought over here. And of course, it was important to the settlers for the same reason. They needed the candles, the wax to make candles, and the sweeteners, and that type of stuff. So let's fast forward up to about 1850. There was a gentleman named Reverend L.L. Langstraw. He developed a movable frame hive where you could put a box in there, and you put the bees on the frame and move it. So that then you could take it out and you could manipulate the hive. That was a major invention. So that's really what changed the beekeeping industry in the 1850s. Well, about that time, a group in Ohio, the Daydat company, the Root Company, started publishing the magazine American Beekeeper. You can the magazine still is a very popular magazine today, and you can go back to the archives and read the magazine back, and you can figure out what was happening on there. And we found out that during the 1880s, people decided to start looking at different subspecies. Well, the first subspecies they brought over was the Italian. You've all heard of Italian bees. Those are the ones I cut out of your house the last when I did that cutout. Italian bees are very productive. They're gentle for the most part, and the problem with them that they turn all their honey into brood. So they produce a lot of honey, but they also produce a lot of bees, and they swarm a lot. Okay, that's really a downplay for them, okay? So American beekeepers in the 1920s, especially around South Georgia, found out that they could start raising queens, and people would buy queens from them. South Georgia had hundreds of thousands of hives, major apiaries down there. There's one in actually called Gardner Apiaries. I think they have 32,000 hives. They have hives, and right now they produce queens and they're shaping packages of bees. A package of bees, 5 pounds worth of nurse bees and a mated queen. They're selling for $150 right now. Gardner Apiaries right now is shaking 700 packages a week. They have 8 crews and they go around to all these 32,000 hives. They got people that work on them full time. And it's a major industry in South Georgia. South Georgia sells about $20 million worth of queens and packaged bees every year. So most people don't even understand that's how big it is. Okay. So now North America, like I was telling you about the almonds, there are 2 types of commercial beekeepers. One is the migratory beekeeper, and the other is the stationary beekeeper. The almonds in January, February, March start off a network of agricultural contracts for the beekeepers, for the migratory beekeepers. After they leave almonds, some of them go to Washington for apples, some of them go to different places for avocados. Then they start doing cranberries and blueberries and cherries in Wisconsin. And then it's the whole circuit that they go to. These are contracts years in advance. If you're a migratory beekeeper and you have contracts to take 200 colonies of bees into somebody's cranberry field in Massachusetts, you better show up with 200 bees, because that's a legal contract. And if you don't show up with them, that's a legal deal. So you pull up there, you set the bees off, leave them there for 4 weeks or whatever the length of the pollination is, pick them up, and then you go to Maine for blueberries. Set them off, put a bear fence around it, leave it there. And then you wind up going to Wisconsin for something. And then the last stop, believe it or not, is North Dakota. Why do they go to North Dakota? Because that's the last place that they have pollinator plants that they can collect the honey crop. So they all wind up in North Dakota is the largest honey producing state in North America, because most of the migratory beekeepers end up in North Dakota, which I thought Georgia produced a lot of honey. We don't produce much honey at all. We produce queens and we produce packaged bees, but North Dakota has by far the most honey produced. After that honey crop in North Dakota, they go back to Florida, they go back to Texas, they go back to Southern California. They requeen them, they feed them, they take care of everything, and they load a back on the truck in January back to California. So that's what a migratory beekeeper does. It's a huge industry. Most people in North America doesn't even understand how big that's a huge industry. The other one is the package bees and the queen producers in South Georgia. That's a big package bees. Right now, everybody's trying to get their package bees. All the hobby beekeepers want to get us a hive started. That's the way you start a hive of bees, is you buy a package of bees, put them in a box and feed them, and then you hope that you're going to have a colony of bees. That's one way to do it anyway. So why am I a micro queen breeder? Does that mean I raise small queens? No. You know, I'm part of a micro brewery or a I'm a very small operation. And instead of being a mass producer like the Southern queen producers, I'm looking for quality versus quantity. In other words, I want the best queens that I can produce, basically for me. If I have anything left over, then yes, I will sell some to somebody else, but I haven't gotten that point yet. That's where I'm hoping to get right now. So I have gotten into a lot of bees that I found. Brother Adam started being a beekeeper in Buckfast Abbey when he was 12 years old. He started there. He was a very weak person. He was a very small child when he was 12 years old. He was from Germany. His mother put him into the monastery when he was 12. And he wanted to be a stonemason, but he didn't have the strength to work the stones as they were rebuilding the Buckfast, the monastery. So the but the beekeeper there needed some help, so he went in 1912, went over there to start helping brother. Don't remember his name. Started helping him, and in 1917, Brother Adam took over the apiary of Buckfast Abbey. Now, this was a terrible time to take it over. There was a disease called acaride. It was actually the trachea mite, which was a minute mite that went into the trachea of the bees. That winter, they had 46 colonies of bees in there. The next spring, when they started looking at the colonies, they only had 16 survivors. So he lost 2/3 of his colony. That was the way he started off his career. When he found out that the 16 survivors were a cross between the Apis mellifera and mellifera, the dark bee, and the Italians, it was a cross. It was a hybrid cross. So he decided, and the acaride killed all the dark bees in UK. It killed every one of them. I mean, none of them survived. But the crosses did survive. So what he wound up doing is he wound up going to France and getting some dark bees from France, bringing them over there, and he kept crossing them with the Italian bees, and he found out that this cross could deal with the trachea mite. And he wound up repopulating the bees in England, in that area, with this cross. Well, this really intrigued him, and he started understanding genetics, how genetics of crosses work. And he studied, there was a lot of different people that were doing works on crosses, people raising cows and different animals. And so he started studying that, and so he came up with the idea that if he could start crossing the other subspecies in there, he could get a bee that he could actually work with. Well, he found out that the drones, the male honeybee, had the best part of the genetics. Now, I got to talk about genetics here for a little bit. The female caste is the queen and the worker bees. Those are the female caste. The male are the drones. The male caste is the drones, okay? The female are diploid. They have 34 chromosomes. The male honeybee comes from an unfertilized egg. And if you tell me how that works, I'll be glad to explain this to you. The queen has an organ in her abdomen called a spermathecia. When she mates, sperm go in her spermathecia, and she can either release it or she can hold it back as she's laying eggs. So when she goes in to measure the size of the hole to lay the egg in, if it's large, she knows she holds back the sperm and she lays a male egg in there. If it's a smaller hole, that's where the workers are, she lays a female egg. What Brother Adam found is that the best genetics came from the drone side of the 17 chromosomes that he had. So what he did is he set up isolated mating yards where he would go out to islands or to places where there were no other bees around, no other type of bees around. And then he would cross the other subspecies. You get virgin daughters from them, and mate them with the Buckfast drones. That's basically how he developed the Buckfast line of bees. And he was able over 70 years to produce this line of bees that's extremely productive, extremely gentle, has every trait that a beekeeper would want to have, and it doesn't swarm. Now, most of you guys don't understand this, but swarming is a major issue, right? This is swarm season right now, okay? Most beekeepers are going through their hives right now, making sure that they're not laying queen cells and they're fixing to swarm out of there. 1967, Brother Adam couldn't keep up with the demand on queens. He could not produce enough queens, but everybody wanted these Buckfast queens. He licensed the Weavers in Texas, 1967. Richard Weaver went over there, met him. He gave him the genetics. He brought the genetics back to Texas, and they started raising the Buckfast bees in North America. Now, most beekeepers will tell you right up that the line is no longer viable because of the genetic changes and all that. So I called out there this is 2 years ago, I called and met Clint Weaver on the phone. I text Clint and I said, can I get some of your breeder stock? I want to start raising your babies. And he said, yeah. And I have an affinity for black queens, absolutely jet black. Okay. And I said, well, do you have any black queens? He says, we call those black beauties. And I said, well, can I get some of those? He said, yeah, that's what we use for breeder queens. I said, that's what I want. I want some breeder queens. So I ordered 10 black beauties. Okay. They're jet black, absolutely gorgeous. And I brought them back in. Of the 10 that I ordered, I got 6 of them in colonies. And last spring, I started grafting queen cells and raising queens from them. Last year, I was about 50% Italian, and I was about 50% Buckfast, okay? And by last fall, the major problem with beekeeping is that there's a mite that's in there. In fact, there's 23 different viruses. Well, Clint told me straight up, he said, we don't treat our bees. They're disease tolerant, and they manage their own mite load. I said, you're kidding me. He said, last time we treated was 2001. He said, we even test them. We even take mite loads and put in there and see how we manage it. Okay. That's the way they select their queens. And I said, well, I'm all over that. You know, I don't want to have to be treating mites all the time. They got over here last summer, I was 50% Italian and 50% Buckfast. And I said to myself, I'm not going to go through all this trouble and go and buy these expensive chemicals, dump in there to kill these mites and deal with that. I'm going to let nature take its course. The 50% of my queens that were Italians no longer exist. They all died. The mites killed every one of them. Now I lost 2 or 3 of the Buckfast, but I also bought 10 more queens from Clint this past fall, and I've got those girls in there. So I'm grafting now from his stock. So that's what I'm trying to do, is try to keep my stock perfect. So this is what I'm telling you. I've let all my Italians die. They're gone. Okay. I do not miss them at all. Well, actually, yesterday I had a yard out that I went to yesterday, and I looked at 2 hives that survived. And I actually saved the queen, but I replaced them with a Buckfast queen. I had a Buckfast that was a little hot. In other words, she was a little hotter than I wanted to. I couldn't get in there without getting aggravated. So I took her out and put her out way out instead of having her in my front yard. So long story short is I'm grafting out of the Buckfast line. Well, let's just call it Buckfast style, because people don't believe that, you know, the line still exists. Brother Adam had 3 levels of queen selection. And what I love about being a queen breeder is I get to look at my queens and decide which ones are going to be the queen mothers and which ones are going to be the drone mothers. So I forced the drone mothers, I put a lot of drone comb in there for them to light on, because I'm practicing what's called drone flooding. I do not have an isolated yard. I've got other Italians around me. I know I do. But I forced my good mothers to be drone mothers to make the boys. And they do. Boy, they'll just like, and a happy colony is one that has a lot of drones in there. I don't know why that is, but they're a lot happier when they got drones in there. And then I get to go around and I look at different characteristics of the queens. Which ones do I want to graft from this week? I go in there, and one of the things that Brother Adam looked for was the defensiveness of the hive. Now, this is not defensiveness of the beekeeper. beekeeper is defending their own store. One of the problems with Italians is they rob their next door neighbor. You wind up with an apiary with one extremely strong hive, and the rest of them are weak because they've already lost all their honey to that one, that's the monster hive out there. So you get rid of that monster hive, and then you keep everybody else going up. The Buckfast have over 200 guard bees to their interest, and you better not go into there because they do not want an intruder in there. And I didn't understand that concept until, when I read his book, and I said, he's looking at that unique characteristic. So I know my wife thinks I'm crazy. I'm going around counting bees in front of the entrance. That's what I do out there. She said, what are you doing out there? Play with your bees. Well, no, I'm trying to look at some of these characteristics that these Buckfast have. He talked about different things in here. He has a 3-level tier for queen selection. One of the criteria was the quality of the cappings. When they cap the brood or when they cap the honey, these Buckfast girls, capping is absolutely immaculate. I mean, it's beautiful. And I'm going, I've never seen this before. And I'm sitting there going, and I mean, Italians don't do that. I mean, they just throw a cap on there. They don't care what it looks like, Oh, am I getting close? Oh, I got 3 more minutes. So anyway, I'm a micro queen breeder. I am raising these bees. I hope to be getting the business one day, and I really enjoy them. They're super easy to work with. They don't swarm, and they're productive. My biggest problem with them is I have to keep enough room in there. When that queen starts laying, she'll lay 3,000 eggs a day. I look at the hive, and there's like six frames cat brood in there. I go, girl, where'd you get this from? Dad, look at more frames to throw in there for her, because you don't want them to swarm. Anyway, that's what I do. I enjoy it. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about it. And my wife thinks I'm crazy. But other than that, any questions?
Got one. Yeah, I've read and seen on the news that a lot of individuals that are in the business that you're in, they're losing their hives, and they don't know where the bees are going.
Well, it's very simple. Okay. First of all, a lot of this is let's call it a hoax, disinformation. Don't worry about it. The commercial beekeepers have got it. Okay. They rose thousands of them down. Now this is what's happened. The Varroa mite, Varroa destructor, Varroa Jacobson, Varroa destructor, there's actually 2 of them, came over from Europe, okay? I'm sure that some migratory beekeepers needed bees, and they just bought them, and they weren't supposed to bring them, but they brought them over here. So as they took these commercial hives around the country, these mites have gotten out. I have mites in every hive got mites in, okay? The mite vector, 23 different viruses in there. The number 1 virus is the deformed wing virus. I see it all the time. In other words, when the young bee hatches out, she doesn't have wings, so she can't fly. That's the number 1. Now, the Buckfast bees are mite tolerant to the diseases that the mites vector, okay? Natural losses on beehives are 20%. In other words, if you have 100 hives, you're going to lose 20 of them every year. With the Varroa mite, you can lose 40% of them. So that's the difference. So basically, most beekeepers, if you don't treat the mites, you're going to lose 40% of your hives every year. That's the number. Okay. Buckfast aren't like that. That is the main reason I went to Buckfast. So you got it? All right.
How much is a black beauty queen cost?
How much do I get to sell it for?
No, how much did you have to pay for them? You said you had about.
I'd get them out of Clint Weaver. I think I paid $35 for it, and then it's probably another $15 on insurance and shipping. So yeah, so that's like $50 for me to get the queen here. I really want to just drive out there and meet them. I haven't done that yet, but that's one of my goals. And I'll probably just go out there and spend some time with them, because this is a different type of bee, and it takes different skill set to manage these. Anyway, you have a question?
I did. So in the public garden world, it's very popular right now to have pollinator gardens.
Right.
If you had to make 3 plants that you would recommend Joe homeowner to plant in their yard for the purpose of these, what would you recommend?
3 plants. Well, the biggest plants that are pollinators, well, I like to see clover, number one. I like clovers because that has a really good pollen. I'm looking for stuff that's got a quality pollen and a nectar source. So they gotta have both of them. Pollen is the protein and the nectar is the carbohydrates, okay? They gotta have both of them in conjunction. The yellow poplar tree that I was asking you about, that is, and I just saw it bloom today, so they open it up, they just drip nectar out, okay? So, I'm sitting there thinking, that's why I asked you if you came, talk about that. Is that all there is that?
No.
The trees that we have in our swamp, the tupelos, the black gums, and then of course up in the North Georgia mountains, there's the sourwood tree, which is the #1 honey in North America, is the sourwood. And we don't have a nectar flow in July and August. They start blooming the 1st of July, so everybody wants to take their bees up to the mountains for the summer. So we will try to find some sourwood, okay? So, what would I tell people around here? I like clover, and I like big things. I mean, you got, 50,000 bees in a colony, and you've got, 20,000 women going out trying to get stuff. I mean, pollinators, they're nice. I mean, I totally want people to see it. But what I'm more interested in is not spraying and killing the dandelions, okay? That's what I'd rather see, not killing the dandelions or that type of stuff. But,
So how far do these bees in your hives travel? Per se?
My area will cover about 80,000 acres, about 2 miles. How far they'll go. Of course, now the Italians don't like to go about 1,000 yards, okay? They're pretty late. So my thing is, I really don't like Italians. I guess you can probably understand that. I think they're flying pigs and things in the yard. And so they're lazy. They bring back a lot of stuff, but they're going to have a lot of brood. I mean, a lot of brood. And they can get ready to get that super off the top of it, and there's nothing there. But yeah, I'm not a big Italian person at all. So anyway, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So your contribution or concentration is on genetics.
Right.
How about the honey?
The honey, well, that's a byproduct to me, okay? I know that when I get my queen where I want to, where I want them, and they're productive, I gotta start stacking the honey supers on there, okay? And I'm at that point right now. Look, I'm going around trying to find all my honey supers. I'm putting them all left and right. Every chance I can. Yes, that is what I want to be ultimately, okay? But what my apiary in my home basically is, I'm trying to evaluate the queens, the drone mothers and the queen mothers, okay? And then I have to have hives where I sell for cell builders. And then I gotta have mating nukes too, so those are nucleus colonies. My wife has asked me, why do you have so many bee boxes around here everywhere? So anyway, I have a lot of bee boxes in my front yard, in my backyard, and everywhere else. But yes, I do concentrate on genetics and that kind of stuff. But honey is something that I do sell honey.
Did you run us all samples?
I told her to put that in the car. She forgot it. I did not. No, but they're always saying, actually, I'm getting very low on honey. What I do is I don't try to mass market my honey. And what I do is I have a box on my front porch. If you drive by my front porch, pull in my driveway, there's a box up there, open the box, get a box, and put your money in and get out and leave, okay? So I do sell off my front porch, but I don't try to mass market because I have a lot of local customers that want the local honey. So I said, well, if I go out and, I have a lot of people who want my honey. I don't even advertise. I mean, it just sells itself. Isn't that right? So, yeah, I do like honey, but I'm gonna tell you something. Extracting honey, getting it right, getting it bottled, all that, that's a lot of work. That's what she does. So, get it sold. So, not only am I out there grafting queens and trying to get queens going, revolving honey and doing all that kind of stuff, and I do enjoy that. Don't get me wrong, I love stuff, it's a lot of fun. But I am basically focused on genetics and queen. I like to sell queens, because a lot of these we produce a queen, it is for a bottle of honey. I see it's like that, so that's where I'm going with this. Any other questions? Very good.
Appreciation of the club. Yeah, you can pick one of these fine pins. And you talk to Mr. Greg Blakely back there, he can tell you what to make, because he makes those for the club.
This looks like a cherry. We'll talk about what that is. Beautiful. Thank you so very much. Wow.
All right, Roger, thank you so much. That was fun. Sweet presentation. Come back and see us again. Everybody have a great day.